Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Welcome to another edition of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy today to have on Logan Swanson. He started, I think, in the restaurant business, and although he went to University of Dallas, and he's the owner of Prime Lend Exchange, and is our expert today on land flipping, subdivisions, and networking and partnerships, which we always talk about that, but don't always necessarily have experts there. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy to welcome Logan. Thank you very much for coming on today.
Oh, pleasure. Glad to be here. I feel so important talking to a New York real estate broker. That's powerful, huh?
We're not so worried about we're in New York. That just happens to be where we're at. So we try to keep things at even keel over here. It's been crazy busy. Um, I've been a broker for about 8 years. I came from the beverage world, so for the most
Mm.
part, and involved in sales and marketing. So, part of this is that in my short time in real estate, there's just crazy stories that happen. And so that's like the genesis of calling it the adventures of a real estate broker, from things like skulls in houses that we're looking at, guns, skulls, pornography. I haven't found any actual dead bodies, just skulls. So, and then just going over that, and then just the different people that we meet. Um, and there's always crazy stuff. So, give me first before we get into the whole thing on land? Tell me some land. There definitely could be some stories, because you hear all the time that people are trying to sell land that they don't own, and
Hmm.
that's probably something that actually is an issue. So, give me a little bit of an adventures of Logan Swanson dealing with with something that has to do with real estate.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of them. We do have one, uh, a few now, where people have tried to sell us land that they have not owned. I have actually bought land from someone that did not own it, and managed to make it work out. But I'll give you two stories. One of them, we had a commercial lot here in north of Dallas in Plano. That was brought to us through our funding company. We also do funding for land flips. And the partner said, "Hey, I have this killer deal. I thought it was like, I think it's like a 3 acre lot, zoned commercial, but I guess it had already had entitlements done for a medical building to be installed on it." And she said, "Hey, we have this under contract for $200,000, and it's worth like 1.5 million. Like, super conservative comp was 1.5 million." And I said, "This is too good to be true," of course. So I started vetting it. She said, "No, this is 100% legit. The company that owned it and did all this work they're having some sort of infighting, and they're having to, sell off all their assets extremely fast, and right person, right time." I said, "Well, this is highly suspect, but okay, we'll keep going." We got the contract signed, sent it over to the title company, and I talked to the title company. I was like, "Something's fishy here, so we need to double, triple check everything. If you're insuring this, you better be sure, because I'm not confident." They swore up and down everything was great. They got all the LLC formation paperwork. They got affidavits signed to ensure that the seller was able to sign off on everything. And after I pushed back like 10 times, they kept saying, "Everything's great, everything's great, everything's great." Well, closing day comes around and they're like, we're actually gonna have to postpone because the seller is in Saudi Arabia right now. And that's suspicious, but not too impossible for this sort of property and the LLC that was selling it and everything. So I said, that's a huge red flag, but if you're willing to do the title work or title insurance on it, we'll keep going. So they pushed it back a week. The next week comes, we wire the funds over to the title company to execute the purchase, and the seller never shows up. So I think whoever was trying to scam us got very cold feet and was afraid of not only wire fraud, but international wire fraud and all the different things that could come after them if they actually executed that sale. Yeah, so we got our funds back, and nothing was lost there, but this happens all the time.
So what's interesting is though, like your title people are running stuff to see who actually owns it. So you were buying it from the named owner, but it wasn't the right people. I guess that's what happened there.
Yeah, so a lot of time what they're going to do is they'll say that they are the landowner. They'll produce, create artificial documentation, fake IDs, things like that. And there's a few tricks to watch out for. Like one of the things that they like to do is they'll switch the transaction from one title company to another title company late in the game. So that one title company will kind of rely on the work done by the other title company. So if there's any fishy experiences with one title company, it'll kind of be erased and restarted with this new one. Because that happens a lot with title, is they just kind of lean on and leverage the work done by other title companies, whether this property's had insurance on it in the past, yada, yada. So yeah, it's become a big issue. That's for sure.
What happens in the case that if you get title and you buy from the incorrect owner, isn't that really up to the title company to at least reimburse you for your expense?
Yeah, so this actually happened to a friend of mine. I have a podcast if folks want to hear it. It's the landfixerpodcast.com. And one of my buddies, he actually bought it's like a $250,000 lot. I forget, somewhere in Arizona, crazy view, very wealthy neighborhood. And the neighbor, he sent his broker out there to go like hammer in the for sale sign because it's a flip. He was planning to double his money. And the broker's out there hammering in the for sale sign, and the neighbor who actually owns that lot calls him, and he's like, "What are you doing? How are you selling my land?" So of course, like that is the worst phone call pretty much that you can get, is that you sent $250,000 and you were scammed. But yeah, he contacted the title company. The title companies, all they effectively do is sell title insurance, and that insurance policy is issued by an insurance company. So they went to their title insurance company and said, "Hey, we screwed up. You have to pay out." And I think it was like a month process, maybe even less. And he got all the money sent back to his account. And he was able to walk away from it. And then that insurance company is usually going to try to pursue or subrogate their damages to wherever the funds were, dispensed.
Right. Well, if he was smart enough, he would have gone to the person who said, "Well, you can't buy my land." And I would be like, "Why can't I? Let's talk. You put it on the market. I clearly want to buy it. It's worth something." And so he could have gotten another deal out of it. So see, he didn't network as much as he should have listened to you, Logan, and handled about your experience on networking and partnerships and things like that. I think he could have gotten another deal in there.
Possibly.
Possibly. That is funny. I've had some where, and I've lent money to help people like get the house ready, and then the last minute we found that the person wasn't the full owner. Their two sisters were also owners. And so and it was like, I actually made more money. I lent more money than I made from the actual sale. So it was kind of important that the sale went through. Luckily for me, in that case, the two sisters basically gave away their right. They knew that they weren't supposed to be owners, and that the father had given it to the other sister because of, I think there was like medical conditions or whatever. So everyone did sign the proper documents. But again, you're dealing with old people, and we're not, sometimes they're not alive, and then you have to go to their heirs, and it can get difficult. So
Yes.
that's one of the stories. Another story like that I had. that is in my book that I'm working on finishing. Um, somebody they weren't sure about the heirs of the house because it was an heir selling it on behalf. It was they were married, but actually then not married, which is a whole other thing. And I had to go to I had to go to a graveyard with a shovel, looking on footstones to see if there was another sibling. Because what happened was, one of the death certificate, not the death certificate, but one of the death announcements from like decades ago, had a typo. Typo made it look like they spelled the name wrong, so maybe there was another sibling, and
Oh,
there could have been
geez.
a whole nother line of heirs. And so the title person wanted me to go to prove that there was not another person who's buried in Grant's tomb. I had to make sure that there was not another sibling. So, and it's raining. I'm with the client. We're both wearing. It's like cold and rainy. We're both wearing shorts, and we're like, I think it's kind of illegal to bring a shovel to a cemetery that's
It's
like a
definitely not
union,
advised. Yeah.
and it's a union cemetery too. So it's like you're not supposed to do anything. So the things that happen in our business are kind of interesting. So it's not, it's not like the normal 9 to 5 job. You bring your lunch to work and you get your lunch in 2 15-minute breaks. That's not what we do. So
No, definitely not.
um
Yeah, and you don't even really know what you're signing up for until you're in the middle of it either most of the time.
exactly. So what made you go from restaurants to land? Like, oh, I'm gonna get in this, and do that. So
Yeah, I
what
mean
made you do the jump?
it was desperation, frustration, all those things. I was working part-time as a restaurant, like serving at a high-end steakhouse at night, and then I was a project manager for a construction company during the day as well. And my wife was working, and we had 3 kids. We were hardly seeing each other. We were hardly seeing the kids. And we still couldn't really put together much in terms of savings or, I mean, it was just kind of, it seemed like this death cycle, where we didn't have any freedom and we had no opportunity for advancement. So I started looking at how I could get into real estate investing. That was the one thing I heard from a lot of folks that, if you just get really good at real estate investing, you can go get rich. I researched, by research, I mean, I listened to a bunch of podcasts on, single family home strategies and all this sort of stuff. And everything seemed really unattainable. For me, I was struggling to put together $5,000-$10,000 at a time. And people were like, yeah, just go buy a house in Dallas for $400,000 and then rent it. And, after you pay the mortgage and everything else, you might make a couple $100 a month off that home. And it just seemed untenable. It didn't really seem like any sort of route out of where I was, at least not a quick route. And eventually I stumbled into a podcast that was talking about land investing, flipping land, saying, yeah, there's places in America where you can go buy land for $70 an acre and sell it for $300 an acre and triple your money. And it seemed kind of unbelievable. But what was the harm? Let's go for it. And I tried it out. I went ahead and got one of those guru courses. And we started buying land in the middle of nowhere and flipping it and making money. And at no point would I say it was really easy, but it was working. Within a couple of years, we built up a big note portfolio of owner financed land that was really kind of a game changer for us. And it just kind of went on from there and kept evolving year over year as the market changed and the tools at hand changed and our experience level changed. Yeah, we just kept branching out.
So, the old adage is like you can't make more land, right? So land
Yeah.
is finite. But it's still everything's a risk, right? So like when people are buying, well, prices go up. It's a supply and demand. So if demand goes down, so it's not, it's kind of tough, right? Because, you know, land, my view would be buying land for the sake of buying land. Um, it can be dangerous buying land and adding to the land, right? Like getting permits for a building or permits for this or that. Well, then you're taking something and you're adding value, right? And sometimes it might be you buy it and you're holding because I'm speculating that something's going to happen down the road. But so it's interesting to me that you could buy. What do you do to buy a piece of land that you're able to double or triple your investment with like without adding technical value to the land. Obviously, um, promoting and communicating and finding somebody else that values the land more than you do. That's how you make that's how it goes up. But so what's the process there? Because it does seem, you're in being the New Yorker and you're the Texan. It always seems like Texas people like, I got an oil field to sell you, and you're going to make it rich because we all are making it rich, right?
Yeah.
So there's certainly a cautionary tale that many people did make it rich in the oil or the gold rush and the oil and all that, but it's also there's risks to that. So how do you take a piece of land and add value to it in one way so that you are able to get those types of returns?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of ways to do it now. But I'll start with kind of the basics. It's like flipping land. So all I'm doing is I'm going to get a piece of land somewhere and then I'm going to go sell it for twice as much, right? Um, so the way that typically works is by first understanding market conditions. And oftentimes land, especially land that's say under the $100,000 price point, it's a very inefficient market. Imagine if somebody approached you as a broker or an agent and said, "Hey, I have a $100,000 piece of land I would like to sell. It's probably going to take 3 to 6 months to sell. You're probably going to have to show the property anywhere between 10 and 30 times in order to find the right person to buy it. And then I need you to do all the paperwork and all this sort of stuff." And you're looking at it and you're looking at like, what's a 3% commission on $100,000 piece of land? Like, this isn't worth my time. I need to go get, $1 million home listings. That's worth my time. So oftentimes there's just a certain price point in which the standard construction of the real estate transaction does not favor the land seller. So folks are oftentimes inheriting land, like you were talking about. They might have just inherited the property. They may have never been there. Grandma or grandpa bought it. They don't even live in the same state. They thought about trying to sell it, but the property is only worth $50,000 or something. They called a couple realtors. The realtor said, "Yeah, sure, I'll put it on the MLS," but they don't really want to even go take photos of it or whatever. So eventually they just give up. They never list the property. It just sits. And since for them, it's just a piece of paper, they're not actually going to the property, they're not using the property in any way. It's something that they either forget about or it's a task on a to-do list that keeps getting pushed week over week, month over month. And then somebody like me calls and says, "Hey, I just saw that you own this property. I would be happy to buy it from you for $25,000. I can close in 2 weeks." Well, for them, they might think in the back of their head, "Well, it's worth more, but this guy is ultimately solving my problem," which is something that no one else has been able to do. So I would go buy that property, bring it to market, and through all the experience, marketing channels, the network that I've created over the years, I can sell that property quickly at, roughly what I would consider a retail value or an expedited retail value, and make money through that inefficient process of just the fact that our system isn't really set up to accommodate these land transactions very well.
I think I like that because that makes much more sense to me, a lower priced piece of land, because if it was a $2 million piece of land, right? Like it would, you couldn't like take a $2 million piece of land and flip it for 4 million because the other people would have stepped in and done stuff. Although to be fair, see, I already get the sense of what you're talking about, networking and partnership, but like it makes sense for you to do that because now that person might inherit other land or know people, and then they're going to call you, and then the next one might not be 25,000, might be 180,000 or 300,000. Work with and so that's how you build you build your client base, right? So for me, I'm only like 8 or 9 years in, but I'm doing 50, 60 deals a year, and I have people that I'm up to like my double digit, transactions with between them and people that they referred to me. Some of them have started with like really little. The least expensive deal I did was a $41,000 apartment that turned into, then I ended up selling it and I got other deals from that. And for land, I actually did a piece of land that took 4 years to sell.
Yep.
I was a dual agent. Um, it was off market. dual agent, probably made 6% on $50,000. Um, and the reason why it took 4 years is because there was two pieces of land that were the same property basically. And the smaller piece of land, the title was never properly conveyed. And without that little strip of land, you couldn't build a house. So it meant that piece of land, that strip meant everything. And so it's a crazy situation that someone, it was a referral, it was a referral. So I even paid a referral fee on it. And it was 4 years. My seller had never been to the land. They're from California. Um, and working, like, we had to hire the buyer, who actually is one of the plumbers that's been used on some of my projects, ended up buying it. He's going to build a house there. He um he basically had to hire private investigators because we had to find out who somebody was so that they would sign a release for like something that should have been done. And this was all a matter of the title people screwing up, and they didn't convey the title properly. And so, it was almost worth nothing without that work being done. And it took 4 years. So the funny thing is, my family and I are out to the dinner in New York City, and somebody says to, like, Danny Berger. And I'm looking at them with the look like, yeah, you got to help me because I don't know who you are. And they're like, you're selling our land. But they're like, from Facebook, I see you. And I never met them before. And I'm walking in, and she's like, Danny Berger, my fan. They're like, and it was very funny because the people were like, oh my God, your husband, he's insane because he's been helping us. There's no business that we're even selling this, but yet he's making it happen. And that was still like 6 months before, or a year before it happened. But it was very funny that I walk into a restaurant in New York City. They're from Napa, and they happen to be like, oh, I saw you from Facebook. So it was and they were very complimentary to my family, saying that the guy's tenacious, he's always available. And so, you know what? You don't know, right? You don't know where things take you. And while clearly from an economic standpoint, it wasn't worth my time, but from a standpoint of, I want to be the broker that knows that I can get things done, even how ridiculous they are, and you just try to help people. And potentially when the person's going to sell it, he may use me, he doesn't have to, but it's someone that he at least knows that I get it done. So that was like a 4-year deal to sell land because of a bad title. And bad title happens a lot.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say that's a perfect microcosm for how people like myself add a bunch of value to transactions. So, you were willing to stick around and play a very active role in solving their problem. Do you think you're in the 99% of agents or brokers that would do that, or the 1%? Most people
Maybe
aren't.
probably a 0.5%.
Right, exactly. So if you think about all the people out there who are in these complicated title situations, multiple heirship situations, um, it's kind of endless the amount of people who struggle to, even if they found a buyer, wouldn't be able to transact on their land and get any sort of clear title because of these complicated chain of title issues that take either someone who's really motivated or somebody who has a little upfront money to solve them. So if you don't have money, you're trying to sell the land to make money, but you need to hire a title attorney that costs $5,000 just to get the transaction done. It just doesn't happen most of the time. So an investor like myself can come into a deal, call somebody and be like, hey, are you interested in selling your land? And they're like, yeah, but I can't. I've tried selling it 3 times, and every time it won't work because, they think there's a dead cousin in, New Zealand who has to sign off on it or something. And I say, oh, well, that's perfect because I'm actually well connected to multiple title companies and real estate attorneys that specialize, or, probate attorneys, people that specialize in solving these problems. If you're willing to work with me and sell this property to me at a discount, I will handle all of that headache for you so that in, a month or so, you just show up at the title company, or not even, like now it's just go to your computer for a little while, digitally sign some paperwork, and you'll get, some money wired to your account. And folks are oftentimes willing to do that deal and at least get some money as opposed to never being able to sell it. And then that gives us the opportunity to get savings on the property, bring it to market, and go sell it.
Yeah. So clearly and that's absolutely adding value. So those are totally different situations of saying, because that's the problem with our industry and some other ones, is that people's promotions are like, oh, you'll buying the house, it's an American dream and you can't lose money. And like, I love when you said the scenario of buying a house, and in the end of the day you're going to get about 200 to $500, in your pocket. That's and that's but that's realistic, right? Maybe you would get more clearly, but like the idea is that there's so many pitfalls that can happen, right? The taxes go up, there could be HOA fees, there's, things break in the house, right? So it's always good to. I'm selling right now a house. It's a horrible story of two correction officers. They both work in Rikers Island, which is a famous jail right by
Mm-hmm.
LaGuardia Airport, and they were swindled by their builder. And some of the money that was coming from their loan to pay for construction, the guy just kept the money and didn't put it in, and it's been an abandoned shell, and it's so it's just like it's like that was they bought land. It's 6 acres of land in a beautiful town, and this was their dream home, and they're going to build it. It is very complicated to do that, and not, you know, generally building is for builders, right? So it's very hard to be an end user, and you're, without knowing who your team is that are going to do that, the chances of fraud or bad work is very high. And so a lot of people are like, I want to buy land and I'm going to build a house here, and I'm like, that is it's dangerous, right? It's not so easy.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, honestly, that's kind of where a lot of these purchases on our end come from, is from folks who, for a long time we operated in areas that were just vacant lots around lakes in Texas. That's everybody's dream. They live in Dallas, and one day I'm going to own that second house on a lake, and we'll go there in the summers, and then we'll retire there when we get old or whatever. So they'll see some subdivision, some sale will go on. People will buy these properties retail and plan to build on them someday in the future. And then when it's, well, one, either they just never do it, right? So they buy the land and then they never end up building on there. So it just becomes a burden after a while. Or they start trying to build and they didn't realize, like, oh, a septic system in this area costs, $20,000 because it's an anaerobic system or whatever. Or there's no water there, so I have to drop a well, and the well's $25,000, and just getting power so before they even start building the house, they could be, $60,000, $70,000 into utility work that they just never thought about or really accounted for. Or specialty foundations. I mean, all sorts of stuff that unless you are really doing your due diligence, you can get burned buying a piece of land. And that's another place where we're able to succeed, right? Is, okay, we get very familiar with an area. We talk to all the locals, the builders, the agents, the brokers, to understand what the pitfalls are buying in this area before we ever make a purchase. So once we're very familiar with the due diligence and the work necessary to ensure that a property is either buildable, or we have a good understanding of what the price would be in order for someone to build there in the future, then that allows us to understand the market conditions enough to be confident in the purchase, because we should at that point know the retail value of the property and kind of who the ideal buyer is.
That's great. I mean, the thing that makes the most sense is you buying land and then working with your team of people to subdivide, to legally subdivide and prepare it, because that's right. That is, and then, that's when you might get someone that's going to buy 4 lots because they're going to build one, or they're going to build two and they're going to sell, or whatever. So that's totally adding value, right? As opposed to that, 6 acres by a lake where it might not even be buildable because of the utility issues, and maybe even the there might be too much bulldozing that needs to be done, and the excavation might be too expensive. So it is interesting that people do have the dream that they want the land and all that. On our side, sometimes if it's not done right, it can be a nightmare for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. Like, that's kind of where our business has evolved to. When we started, it was more just kind of standard flipping. Let's go try to buy land cheap, sell it higher. We worked in rural areas to start recreational properties. Then we got kind of closer. I'm in Dallas, so we got closer to home, Dallas, Texas, started operating in kind of like an hour and a half radius from the Metroplex. And then a couple years ago, we started getting into subdivision projects where we would buy large acreage and we do what are called simple or exempt subdivisions, where you, in Texas, there is a state law which says you can subdivide any lot down to 10-acre parcels without any regulations. The county doesn't have to approve anything. Nothing has to happen except you call a surveyor. The surveyor does the diagramming. It all has to have some sort of legal access. And then you send it over to the appraisal district. They issue APNs, and that's your whole subdivision. You're done. Now, we've never gone that simple. We always at least make sure that there's power and roads and things like that so that people can come and build there. But we started doing some of these simple subdivisions, and oftentimes you're able to buy something much closer to a retail value, and then just through the subdivision and value add process, still effectively double your money on a large project. And, without really feeling like I'm shortchanging the initial seller. You're actually adding all the value. And that's kind of where we like to be now. We're either adding value through clearing up the difficult title issues, through some sort of subdivision process, entitlement process, where, say, we haven't done this yet actually, but a lot of people in our industry will take, say, 20 acres, and they'll work with the city to get all the permits and approvals in order for a builder to come in and actually do all of the work. They call it getting shovel ready. So you can make shovel ready communities, sell those to like DR Horton, things like that, add a ton of value to the property without picking up a shovel. All sorts of things that you can do just kind of on the paper end or doing flat work without ever having to go vertical, where you can do a lot to add value to the property.
See, that's where when people hear land and land flipping, it probably it's a little bit more like used carsman salesmanship, but it's not. Like everything that you've talked about to me makes so much sense. It's adding value. It's being proactive and trying to help with getting a community done. Uh, those are the things that people need. So, right, shovel ready is really important. So, and then of course the buyer has to make sure is it ready. Then what they bring in their builder and their architect or whatever to make sure that things are good. That's part of the issue with my latest one where um they were sold that there's sewer on the block. Well, there is a sewer on the block, but there's no pump station. So in order to get to use the sewer, it's actually cost prohibitive so that you still are needing septic, right? And
Mm.
septic for us, I think it's like 25 to $40,000, septic, the fields, whatever. Then the septic is gonna where the septic's gonna go with the leach fields is gonna also make going to have a bearing on the 6 acres and potentially could affect the subdivision, right? So it's not subdivided now. It probably can be, but can you build another structure? I mean, that all now has to go into account. Where is the septic tanks and the leach fields, and does that affect the land for potentially a second property? So those are things that like because I'm looking at the old listing. The old listing says sewer. Well,
Yeah.
it's not, so that was there was a lot that was disingenuous with the entire process. And so for my client, we're working with ripping the Band-Aid off. It's emotional, their life savings was invested. They probably have to work a little bit longer. They wanted to retire, but I don't think that's now possible. Sell this for as high as we can, and it's on the market to do that. Take, end that project and then and then let's find something else that all they wanted to do was they work their butts off. They do a lot, and they're working criminals every day. So it's interesting that they then found a criminal to build their house. But ultimately, and that, like, to them, this house is a dream. And I said, no, the dream is really that you and your family can have a place to gather and to raise each other. And, that's really the dream. This is a shell. And so I'm trying to have them pivot to let's finish this because it's just not obtainable. And then we're going to move on to another property where your dream is going to still happen, just in a different property. And so, a lot of what we do is not just the it's also being a psychologist, right, or a psychiatrist, maybe even, although we're not giving out drugs, but it's trying to help people in their headspace, right? Because it's bad things happen to a lot of different people. So, how can we, to each of us do the best that we can to help people in their, in their endeavors.
Yeah, and I mean, you even use that with sellers, right? So we might find a seller that isn't really motivated or asking for a price that we cannot pay for a property. And oftentimes we just have to kind of reverse engineer for them our costs and the things that are going to go into it on our end to help them understand the reality of the situation. Especially for some of these listings that we encounter where they've listed it multiple times on the MLS and the listings just expire and there's no way for them to move it through the standard transaction process. We're able to come in and solve those issues and tell them exactly what it's going to cost and what it's going to do or what it's going to take from us. And once we were able to kind of walk them through that and allow them to grieve and say, I know, I understand, it's not fun, you're wishing for more. Usually all parties are kind of able to leave happy.
So, from in researching a little bit about you, I understand that you're involved with, creating structured deals with using creativity. Give me an example of, something that you've probably done that others wouldn't, which help, benefit you and your clients.
Yeah. So, well, first off, I'm only an investor. I'm not a broker. So, clients for me or myself, I'm my client. But we do have a funding company, so I guess we have clients there. But one example of a creative structure we set up was some folks that we had done some funding for in the past. They had flipped a couple properties and used my funding company, and they're great operators. They came to me and they said, "Hey, Logan, I have this 320 some acre parcel in Cumberland County, Tennessee, and we're very confident that we can subdivide this property down into 24 lots or 27 lots. We just have to run roads and power through the community. If we can buy it at 1 million, it's going to cost about 1.2 million for us to develop it, and then it'll be worth 3.4 million." And for us, we said, well, those numbers are pretty good, but anytime that we're getting into a deal, even a development deal, we need to have enough room to double the money. So your financials don't quite work out to where we would be able to get it done for you. So I actually worked back and forth with them in order to set up a owner finance structure with the seller. So the seller is owner financing to us. We're affording all the capital expenditure to put in the roads and the power. So all in, we'll be close to like 1.2 to 1.4 million out of pocket, with the proceeds or the potential profit on the deal roughly equivocal to that. So 1.2 to 1.4 million. So I was able to insert myself in the transaction, structure it between myself and the operator, and then ourselves and the initial seller, assist them in all the different ways that we could subdivide the property, engineer it to be more efficient, help them select contractors, fund everything for them, and give them all the advice necessary to bring it to market and sell it. And they're going to make a very good amount of money for no money in. All they're going to do is find the deal and be the operator. The land seller is going to actually get above what they were hoping to get because we increased their total purchase price on a 9-month balloon by doing the owner finance. So literally everybody in the equation wins, and it just took a little bit of back engineering and confidently being able to restructure it in such a way to get it where everybody could win.
Right. Well, that's great. I think that's, we definitely can be getting ourselves involved in win-win relationships, eyes wide open. A deal happens when both sides are, agree to certain things. Obviously, sometimes someone might have to give up more, but in the end of the day, everyone's saying yes. And then it's like, how do we make it happen? And for you, if you're buying with someone, how do you give them the number that works for them or a plan that makes sense? So, well, that will help with continued business as well as, referrals and all that. So, what do you see that, in the coming year or so, what does it look like for you and what do you think's happening in the market?
Well, I think we've been kind of in a well, let's just say this. I'm not big into predicting general market shifts. If I were, I would say that we're probably going to see a little bit more of a buyer's market coming our way. I think we're actually kind of already in one, but the sellers don't realize it yet. So at least in land, we're seeing longer days on market, people still trying to command a higher dollar for property when there's just less sellers there's more buyers who are able to be picky with the purchases because there's more listings on market. Now for the areas that I operate in, Texas, for example, Tennessee, for example, we like to kind of stay in what I call the freedom belt, where there's less restrictions, more opportunities, and more real estate friendly laws. The U-Haul data is showing there's just still continued growth. Texas, so I think South Carolina was the number one state people are moving to as far as demographic research. Next is Texas, and then Tennessee. So all the areas that we're already specializing in operating in are still growing as far as the number of people moving in. So we're still going to continue to be focused on producing affordable, either residential or ranchette products as far as subdivision goes. And that's also what we're going to stick in as far as flipping, is kind of those affordable properties where people can still buy cash, because that's very important to our model as far as like the numbers and the cash flow works. For us to be optimized, we need to be transacting the same money 2 or 3 times a year in order to operate very efficiently and be very profitable. So those markets we still think are going to be great for us, and those products we think are going to continue to be great for us. So that's what we're going to focus on.
Well, that's good. So it's good that you have your plan, that you're also, it seems like you're a realist, right? And I think you said it earlier, where there's no quick get rich quick scheme. It's hard work, but it's certainly different than working at a restaurant. And I've done that as well. But this way, it seems like you're working out of your home, and so you're able to be
Yeah.
with your family and all that. But it's like the internet is this wonderful thing that allows us to work really from anywhere. I'm in New York, you're in Texas, and we're able to have a nice little chat and podcast. And do our learnings and sharing and networking and all that. So I think that's great. You basically, were doing what you had to. You looked in you saw, you knew the restaurant life was not one that you wanted, and you basically, did your own homework. I'm sure you learned much more in those podcasts than at the University of Dallas, where, the school of hard knocks and working your butt off and putting up your own money and your own collateral and all that, and then understanding it is certainly your pulse. You certainly have a pulse of what's going on. I wish you continued success. It was great learning a little bit about land flipping, subdivisions, and all that, because it's something that's not talked about all the time, but it's always out there. So, embrace it and make sure that you understand what's going on, so that you're able to, whether you're the investor or you're working with brokering a deal, that you make sure that you're paying attention to what it is and getting things done. So I thank you, Logan, for being on our podcast this week. Best of luck again to everything. It's you're definitely an entrepreneur. You're making things happen, and that's what's so awesome about this business, is that there are a lot of people like you out there, but you seem like you're doing, you're standing above the crowd, which is certainly a good thing. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's episode with Logan Swanson. I'm Daniel Berger for the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker.
Thank you, Danny.
Excellent, Logan. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, RE/MAX Prestige Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.